What's going on, guys? We got back with another case review, and this time it is the O11 Mini V2 from Lian. Now, we first saw this earlier this year, I would say at the start of the year at CES, where we took a pretty good look at this in the Lian suite. And then also later on in the year at Computex, we only covered a little bit there, and now we finally have it here. So like always, we'll cover everything you need to know about this build, all the water cooling and so on, and then finish it off with a sick build. It's been a long time coming, and the Mini V2 is finally here. With having done 5 builds in the OG O11 Mini, it's time to see what this new updated version is all about. The Mini V2 still keeps the same classic O11 style, but we do get a bit of a facelift and some new updated features like back connect motherboard support, removed corner pillar, and now a huge bonus, standard ATX PSU support. Case dimensions stay pretty much the same at 391 high, 425 deep, and 274 wide, but I feel the internal volume is larger as the case now sits very close to the floor with a very low profile base. This has been achieved with a slanted design where the base is flat, but the inside bottom of the chassis is at a 10-degree angle. By doing this, we find roughly 28mm of clearance at the rear for air intake. This isn't the first time we've seen a design like this, and probably won't be the last. The chassis comes in 4 models, an all white or an all black version, both with no fans, plus another flow version that comes with 5 20mm reverse fans for just $10 more. On the black model, you'll find a brushed aluminum accent on the top. The white has a 100% clear side panel, while the black model has the more standard medium tint. Where the side panels meet, you'll find a bevel for that more premium look. All panels are held in via thumb screws and push-in clips, and a new addition, which I haven't seen used before, are magnets. Both the front and main side panels use magnets to help keep them in place, while the front only uses push-in clips and magnets to lock it in. I found this solution worked well, and it takes quite a bit of force to pull the front off. Just keep in mind that the main side panel only has a magnet securing it in at the top front. For front I/O, the default location is at the bottom front edge, and here you'll find 2 USB 3.2 Gen 1 Type A, 1 USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type C, audio combo port, and the power button. Just like in most of Lian's O11 cases, this front I/O module has a secondary location at the top. To swap locations, you first need to remove 4 screws from inside the chassis that secures the I/O module in. Feed all the I/O cables out of the case, unscrew the top panel cover on the case, and then remove the I/O blanking plate in this panel. Mount the I/O module back in this panel and feed the I/O cables back down into the case. For case rigidity with all panels removed, I found was quite good, especially with how low profile the top metal frame was, but once the front panel goes back on, all flex is gone. 3 dust filters can be found, one at the bottom that slides out from the back, one on the removable top panel, and one on the rear side panel. My only gripe with the top and side panel filters is that they are glued in. So for any cleaning, you need to take the whole panel out with you wherever you go to clean them. Inside the Mini V2, you'll find 2 main motherboard sizes supported, which are ATX and MATX. Technically eATX do fit, but this case isn't really designed for that, and you'll start to creep into the side fan spot. With an ATX board installed, we get an idea of the true size of this case, and as you can see, it's not much larger than this Strix X870-A motherboard. The Mini V2 only has 5 PCI slots, so keep that in mind if your planned HX board has its primary PCIe slot at the very top, right under the I/O. I went through my 50+ boards I had on hand, and none of these used the first slot in the chassis apart from this relic Rampage 3 XTREEM I found. The first slot is primarily used for MATX and ITX motherboards, so if you plan on using one of these board sizes in your build, Lian has thought of this, and you need to drop all the motherboard tray standoffs down to the lower position, and this will now line up correctly with the PCI area. For cable cutouts around the motherboard tray, there are 3 large ones at the top for EPS and other top motherboard connectors. For 24-pin, you find this rather interesting half grommet where the whole module can slide. The reason for this sliding is when you drop the motherboard tray standoffs down to the lower position, you need to slide this tray down to keep everything in line. Under this, there is a large cutout for SATA and other cables for the bottom, and this is where things get a little funky because the motherboard sits so low. For bottom motherboard headers, you can use the cutout for the back connect motherboards, as there is just a small gap to feed cables under, as the case has a little indent just for this, or you can use the fat cable grommet in the base of the chassis to feed cables from the back to the front going under the motherboard. This grommet can also be used for feeding your GPU power cable as well. The Mini V2 also supports back connect, and I had no issues with my test Z790, TUF BTF, MSI Z890 SPZ, and the Aorus B650E Stealth Ice. For GPU clearances, there is roughly 414mm to the front of the chassis, or 270mm to the side radiator location, and my test ROG Strix 4090 had no issues here. You may have noticed already, but Lian have also included an anti-sag bracket that comes pre-installed in the chassis. This has multiple sliding positions to cater for different size video cards and can be locked into place via a single thumb screw. I had no issues using this with my test GPU, and there was no sag at all. The Mini V2 comes with a rear bracket for mounting your GPU vertically. You can either install this to the case first by removing the stock standard bracket, or mount it to your GPU first. Then you need the vertical anti-sag bracket that is also provided. This is designed to mount on the bottom of the chassis on top of fans, like so. This bracket can slide forwards and back to get the exact position, and is also height adjustable via the front thumb screw. The only thing Lian does not provide is the riser cable. I used a 30cm link-up one, which worked fine. Overall, the vertical setup worked pretty good, and the GPU was actually much more stable than I thought it would be. GPU width for water block GPUs is going to be tight at only 155mm. As you can see, this ROG Strix 4080 with a thermal take block is a fraction too wide, but this 7900 XTX Power Color Liquid Devil fits exactly. For CPU cooler height, there is 160mm. Around the back for PSU support, you'll find standard ATX power supplies now fit, which is great. This is achieved where the PSU actually sticks a bit outside the case, and there is an indent in the side panel. To cater for this, there is 170mm of clearance to the SSD cable cover. If your PSU is longer, you will need to remove this cover. Storage is kept simple with two main locations. The SSD cable cover holds two 2.5-inch SSDs, while two hard drive caddies can be found under the PSU. These caddies can each hold one 2.5-inch SSD on the outside, while a 3.5-inch hard drive goes inside. For rear cable management, there are plenty of Velcro tie-down points, and you remember those bottom hard drive caddies? If not using them for hard drives, these can actually house cables. Most people love to jam cables in unwanted hard drive caddies, and Lian has picked up on this and made these cages even better. These ones can open up to allow you to stuff your cables in, then squish down to hold them in there. I'll cover how cable management went in my build in the outro. Moving on to AIO support, and I would say the top 360 would be your main option here, as the side can only take up to a 240. Lian have done a really good job at pushing the radiator spot all the way towards the main side panel, and I can see radiator and fans will clear motherboard VRMs and most memory modules, but clearance to my test G-Skill Trident Z5 was about 69mm. Another neat feature is the top 360 radiator bracket is removable. This comes in handy as you can install your all-in-one cooler to this bracket outside the case, then mount it back into the chassis. As you can see, my test HydroShift 2 installed fine with no issues. For custom radiator support, there are three main locations: top, bottom, and side, but I would probably use the side for something like a flat reservoir. For radiator clearances, I'll just use the standard ATX motherboard layout, as dropping the standoffs to the lower position doesn't really gain anything, as you can still fit a massive Alpha Cool Monster 360 with fans at the top, even with an ATX motherboard. EK radiators are out of the question, as they are too long and wide to fit in either the top or bottom locations. Make sure your radiator of choice is no more than 397mm long and 125mm wide. I had no issues with Alpha Cool HPE 45 or Bitsbauer Leviathan 2 radiators in either the top or bottom locations. The top supports up to 360 radiators, just like previously with our AIO setup, or two 140mm fans. Here I have a 40mm thick Bitsbauer Leviathan 360 with fans installed, and it fits in nicely. Bottom supports up to 360 radiators, or three 120mm fans. Clearance to my test 4080 GPU was 95mm, and the bottom features a removable bracket which screws in from the front. Here I was able to install another 40mm thick Bitsbauer Leviathan 360 with fans. Moving over to the side location, and this area supports only two 120mm fans or a 240 radiator. There's also a good 50mm of clearance in the back chamber for, say, fans for a push-pull config, a radiator for a cleaner look, or pump from a flat res combo. And it's great to see that both DDC and D5s fit in the back here. With my test radiators still at the top and bottom, I had 80mm of clearance in the main section for radiator and fans. Combine that with the 50mm in the rear makes a very versatile setup. Like on many O11 cases, Lian supplies two blanking plates for the side fan area. These are designed to optimize airflow, whether your fans are centered toward the bottom and at the top. I feel these needed to be a fraction larger, as there was still a small gap once installed. Alrighty guys, and like always, let's check out the final build. So I really did try to jam as much in the final build as I could, but we'll talk a little bit more about the water cooling and a bit around the back a little bit later on this video. But a few more things to talk about is the rear cable management. No issues there. My bulk of my cables ran down the middle behind that SSD cable management bar. Now I did use a Seasonic Vertex PSU, 1200 watt. Seasonic do make relatively short PSUs. It wasn't any longer, so I did not have to remove that bar. But even with that bar removed, the cable management still looks pretty good. I didn't just sort of stuff it in there and just jam that bar back over. Everything is nicely zip tied down and it just fits in there nicely. Now, the front IO, I do want to mention the front IO cables, not so much the front IO itself, but the cables are very, very long. I managed to sort of wind them up around that pump res combo I have at the back, which I'll talk a little bit about that later on as well. But they are long. I'll get a shot. I think they're like this long. Now, they didn't do that on purpose or for any random reason. They did do it because they have to do that because to reach up the top IO, because of the multiple locations, you can have the IO at the front, you can have the IO at the top. So obviously the front location is going to be a bit shorter by default than when it needs to route up the top, because when it goes at the top, you don't want it to just go straight on an angle down to the bottom. You want to feed it down along the front, along the bottom, then underneath, and then up into your motherboard. So that's why it is a little bit longer than what you would probably need. Now, one interesting thing that I completely nearly missed, I was speaking to Lian the other night, just about something random off topic, and then I mentioned the case is a bit of a pain to lift up all the time. You've got this nice wedge on the back where it's raised up. You can actually fit your hand in there, but there's nothing at the front. And the guys actually said, well, there is a handle built in. You just have to remove the plastic triangle. So at the very front, there are two screws holding it in. You undo that. By default, they've left it blocked, and you can undo the two screws, pop out the triangle, and now you have a little bit of a handle. And that doesn't seem like much, but that makes such a big difference. It's kind of insane. It's hard to sort of explain how much of it is, because every time I go to pick it up, I would easily grab the back, because the back you got the bottom, or you've even got like the cutout where the PSU is. Even when the PSU is in there, there's still a bit to grab onto. Even the motherboard IO, there's a little bit of a lip, but the front, it was completely flat. So I always have to try and rock the case up and get my hand under it. But that little triangle's there. You can remove that if you want to. I would suggest doing that. Don't miss it. And it also adds that little bit of extra airflow as well, because then you have intake on the front bottom as well if you have bottom fans. So just a tip for that one. There is a 24-pin leveler. Now you might be wondering, what is that? So most of the times when I do a build, you put your 24-pin cable in nicely and it'll either droop down, or sometimes randomly it even droops up. So this leveler is just a slide. It's like an anti-sag bracket, but it's for your 24-pin cable. So you install your 24-pin motherboard cable, then you adjust this leveler up and down, and it will kind of just sort of compensate that sag and push up the 24-pin nicely to keep it nice and level. Now, I did use it in this, but then I've used a lot more zip ties as well, because I am really sort of, I would say, anal when it comes to getting the 24-pin perfectly curved. I don't like it to be sort of sagging down, sagging up, and then I don't like it to be skewed either. So I spent a bit of time on getting that perfect. Now, one thing I do want to mention is my little, I'll see if I can get this one out. There's an IO spacer. So if you're following in this video, when you drop the motherboard down, there's an IO spacer that comes default in the bottom. You move it up the top. So on my white build, first time I took this IO spacer out, it's a bit of plastic, it did snap. So be mindful of that. If you aren't going to be adjusting the motherboard height, if you're going M-ATX or ITX, you pretty much do need to do that. Drop your motherboard down, those standoffs, you'll need to remove this plastic spacer and put it at the top. First time I moved it in the white build, it completely snapped one side, and then doing it a few more times, it snapped the other side. So be mindful of that. I'm sure if you reach out to Lian, they can send you another one of these. For water cooling, I want to just focus on some few things that once I did this build, because when I did my whole B-roll on the white empty chassis and went through all the components, I then do the build afterwards. So I do pick up on a few things that I learn doing this build. So be mindful that, I think I said there was like 95 millimeters of clearance from the bottom to the underneath of my test 4080 GPU that I had in there with a water block. Now, when I measured that, that is also from the back. Because it's slanted, there's no point measuring it from the front side, because there's a larger gap at the front than there is at the back. So that was 95 at the back. But be mindful on things like thicker cards. Most water blocks are, I would say, normally within a few millimeters of each other. There might be some special edition ones that are thicker, which is like this one here. So this is a 4090 matrix, and I must say it looks so killer in this build. It just really complements everything. Now, this was originally designed for a all-in-one cooler. It had it attached out the back of it. It's been modified with the Modding Cafe conversion kit. Now, he has released those. You can pick it up if you do have this card, and then you can add it in a custom loop. But the main issue is it makes this card very thick, especially for a water-blocked GPU. So it was tight at the back. It's going to be hard to see, but where this rad and fan slope up to the back of, or the bottom of this GPU, there was only a few millimeters of clearance. But if you're running a standard block, you should be fine. I know some motherboards now, this motherboard has a primary 16 by slot in the second one. Some boards, I was going to use a Strix-E, I think, from Intel. That PCIe, the primary starts in the third slot. So if I was to go one down, there's no way this GPU would fit with this rad. I would have to go with a slim rad, so be careful of that. Also, be mindful of GPU width. So earlier I mentioned that my Thermaltake block on the 4080 did not fit with the side panel. The Power Color 7900 XTX Liquid Devil did fit. So I think 155 millimeters is what I mentioned earlier is the maximum you can fit for the width before the terminal will start failing. That is the side panel. If you don't want to put the side panel on, that's fine. You can go a little bit longer, it will stick out. One more thing I do want to mention, running bottom Lian Li fans. Running them without a rad, that's fine because they're lower down to the case. Because this is slanted this way, it skews your sort of hardware out a little bit. So Lian Li fans are, I would say, very fat. They're very wide, wider than traditional fans. So these ones are the TL LCD wireless. So they stick out. So I can see this Bits Power rad is, funnily enough, the rad is not as wide as the actual fans. Normally it's the other way around. Your rad is normally wider than your fans, but Bits Power rads aren't very wide, but these fans are wider. And I noticed when I was building this that if I sit back here, the fans originally were sticking outside the case because they're that little bit wider. Now, luckily when this bracket goes in, there's a little bit of play backwards and forwards that the rad and the fan sit on. So I managed to put 3 washers down before screwing it in. So we're 3 washers in, 3 washers in. It didn't need to be much. It only needed to be a few millimeters. That pushed this whole rad bracket back a little bit. And now I can close the side panel. So just want to mention, if you did go with even a thicker rad, so the higher the rad you go, the further it's going to skew your fans out. So this is a 40mm Bits Power rad. If you went 45, if you manage to fit in something like a 54 or even a 60, it's going to push those fans even further out. So I just wanted to mention that as well. Now, for something like a reservoir support for this one, a good spot is under the power supply. So you can remove those 2 hard drive cages out if you don't want to use those. Often in a lot of my builds, I do put those square flat pump res combos underneath. No fancy sort of trickery to get them installed. I just normally use double-sided tape. Normally they have a nice big thick flat base. Couple of bits of double-sided tape, stick it down, and that is not going anywhere. Sometimes you can mount the actual, if they have brackets, you can mount it to the back of the motherboard tray, but I didn't want to do that. Just sticking it down is enough. And there's quite a bit of room down the bottom. I did get the dimensions if anyone is wondering if they have an FLT or a flat reservoir. Obviously, 120 is pretty much going to be a standard size. I think a 240 would be a stretch because you'd have to fit it lengthways and it might creep into the cable management area. For the height, you want to keep it down to 140 millimeters or less. And then for the depth, so this is the depth from the edge of the case back towards the motherboard, you're looking at about 78 millimeters deep. Now for the width, I wouldn't really worry about that. As long as you're not going anything like a 240, then it might be a bit of an issue. But yeah, 145 high, 78 deep. And then this one is the Bits Power one. That's got their own sort of DDC version pump on it, and that fits in there nicely. Also having side ports will be handy because there's no room. If you only have ports on the pump res combo that are on the face of it, there's no way that I can fit the unit and then the fittings as well for the side panel to close. So I was lucky that this Bits Power one has front ports and side ports, and I could use the 2 side ports to feed into my loop, the in and the out, and then soft tubing to get it to the rest of the components. Now, before I wrap this up, a little bit about the build. So the whole theme and idea about this, if you remember on the Evo RGB, I'll put a screenshot on it. I did a bit of a Tron theme. It was this same coolant, sort of aquary, bluey, greeny color, don't know what you call it. And that was very popular. A lot of people were messaging me about that, especially with the pump res combo around the back. Similar style, similar design, although I did use all EK in that one. This one I couldn't use EK because of the rad issue, so I decided to go with all Bits Power for the rad, the fittings, The water block is the Optimus, the AM5, or I think it's the AM5 one. That looks really nice. It's just very subtle, nice and clean, nothing over the top, no RGB, and it just looks really nice in this system. So yeah, I went with 3 rads. They are all 40mm thick, so I'd say about a medium size, no slims, no larger than 40, 360 bottom, 360 top, and the 240 on the side. I opted to go with the 240 in the back chamber just to give me a little bit more room, and then the fans in the main chamber because you do have that room in the back there, which I mentioned earlier. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Went with the same Tron vibe. The only thing that I changed was the GPU. I changed to like a reddish orange because I did have some little animated GIFs on the LCD screens of the sort of Tron theme going on there, and that was sort of the bluish, greenish, and orange. So I made the matrix stand out with changing the color combo for that one. Also threw in the Thermal Grizzly Wire View Pro. Haven't used those before. They did send me some, and I finally had a build where I could use them. So many builds I do, the GPU is in an odd place. I've got either a tube running, but this one just managed to fit in, and the cable runs around, and it just looks so nice in this build. Now you might be wondering, why did I use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8? I was going to use the 9th on the back, but I couldn't fit it because of this tubing. 9 or 8 LCD Lian Li fans. Well, unfortunately, my inventory was running a little bit low on other fans, and all I had were LCD fans. Now, normally I wouldn't put the 3 LCD at the top, and I probably wouldn't even put the 3 LCD on the bottom. So if anyone questions me, well, that's a waste putting those expensive LCD fans. Unfortunately, that was all I had in my inventory. So instead of adding like another type of fan, like a non-wireless, I would have needed another controller and so on. I just put all the LCDs, and at least they all matched. And then the top ones, I pretty much just turned the brightness down, so that does shut off the LCD, and then they just look like normal fans. So that's just why I ended up going all out for LCDs. Wasn't trying to like show off and just see how many LCDs. It was just that that's all I had, and that's what it ended up with. But yeah, that's it on the overall build. Kind of came out really nice, and it's actually really dense. Like, this is a solid little system. So this is 45 liters. The chassis, you got a bunch of water cooling in there, and then the motherboard is full ATX, mind you. Like, I've seen MATX cases that are this size or bigger. This is the X870E Hero in there, and then I got that really nice, if you're looking at doing a Tron theme, this Team Group T-Force ARGB memory, the DDR5 looks so good how all the sides light up. So if you're doing a Tron theme, that memory looks really killer. And then of course I got that bits power pump res combo around the back, which just kind of, I think, cleans up the whole build. You don't have anything sticking out here. Could have gone with a 240 res on the side, but I decided to go with maximum rads just to see how it all looked. Now finally, let's take a look at price. Earlier in the video, there's 2 main models, black and white of each, and then there's a version that has the 5 fans or the version with no fans. So 4 models all up. The model with no fans, so that's what I had here, no fans at all, is $89.99 US. And then the model with the 5 fans, which is pretty crazy, is $99 US. So $99.99, so $100 for the 5 fan version, or bang on $90 for no fans. So extra 10 bucks for fans. Now mind you, they're not like RGB fans, anything like that. They're case optimized fans. So all you'd need then is fans on your all-in-one cooler, and you're good to go. So if you're doing something like a stealth build, no RGB, 2 fans on the side. It comes with 3 fans on the bottom. They're all reverse flow. So in here, your all-in-one cooler will be exhaust. Rear can be either exhaust or intake. I'd probably do exhaust, and you are good to go. If you were looking at doing a full ARGB build, maybe get the non-fan version, because you'll probably end up getting fans to throw in the chassis. But overall, pleasure building in this chassis. No real issues apart from this, the only thing that sort of broke in the build. But yeah, that's it. I want to thank you guys for watching, and I do want to thank Lian Li for sending this out for me to do a review and a build. And I do have a time-lapse video as well, so stay tuned for that, and you'll see more on this build in that video. But anyway, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.